Case 20. Lee versus China Airlines. We find ourselves here in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. Facts. This case is one of several involving China Airlines Flight 006, a Boeing 747, on February 19, 1985. The Lees were injured on that flight when the 747 made an unexpected and uncontrolled 31,000-foot descent off the coast of California. The Lees are permanent residents of California. Mr. Lee is in the international garment manufacturing business, so he makes frequent trips to Asia. They purchased the tickets which allowed them to travel on Flight 006 in Hong Kong. These tickets were for round-trip travel from Hong Kong to San Francisco. The date and flight number on the return portion of the ticket were left open. Defendant China Airlines has moved to dismiss because of lack of jurisdiction under the Warsaw Convention. The plaintiffs, John and Margaret Lee, argue that Article 28 of the Convention does not require dismissal of China Airlines, and that even if it does, the court should ignore the Convention's mandate because the Convention is unconstitutional. What's the issue? Whether the Warsaw Convention is unconstitutional. The court disagrees and grants China Airlines' motion to dismiss. Reasoning. The itinerary was for round-trip travel between Hong Kong and San Francisco. Different origins and destinations around the world implicate different laws, different standards of fault and liability, and maybe most important or related, different damages regimes. Hong Kong was the Lee's destination, and it is a high contracting party of the Warsaw Convention. Thus it had jurisdiction of the case under Article 28 of the Warsaw Convention, which says, an action for damages must be brought at the option of the plaintiff in the territory of one of the high contracting parties, either before the court having jurisdiction where the carrier is ordinarily resident, or has his principal place of business, or has an establishment by which the contract has been made, or before the court having jurisdiction at the place of destination. Questions of procedure shall be governed by the law of the court seized of the case. The Lees argued that even if the court found that Article 28 of the Warsaw Convention required dismissal of China Airlines in a U.S. court, the court should still not have dismissed their case because the Warsaw Convention is unconstitutional. The Lees made three different arguments on the constitutionality issue. Number one, the convention constituted a substantive due process violation because it impaired the allegedly fundamental right to international travel. Number two, the convention constituted an equal protection violation because it treated passengers on the same airplane differently depending upon the content of their tickets. And three, at the suggestion of the court, the convention was a procedural due process violation because it deprived them of the opportunity to have their tort claim heard in the U.S. The court found all three arguments to be meritless. So how does the court treat interstate travel different and international travel differently as a matter of law? In Califano, the U.S. Supreme Court stated that legislation which is said to infringe the freedom to travel abroad is not to be judged by the same standard applied to laws that penalize the right of interstate travel, such as durational residency requirements imposed by the states. The court added, this court has often pointed out the crucial difference between the freedom to travel internationally and the right of interstate travel. The constitutional right of interstate travel is virtually unqualified. By contrast, the right of international travel has been considered to be no more than an aspect of the liberty protected by the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. As such, this right, the court has held, can be regulated within the bounds of due process. As a result, the limitations upon international travel are evaluated under a rational basis test. Applying this test, the court goes on to note that treating similarly situated people differently is not always unconstitutional, and the court finds that the distinctions made between passengers on the same plane because of the provisions of the convention are rational. The goal of the convention is to bring uniformity to the law governing international air travel. This goal is fostered by the method set up by the convention to determine whether it is applicable to a particular journey. The convention dictates that applicability is determined by the place of departure and the place of destination as listed upon a passenger's ticket. This mechanism ensures that the convention will only apply to journeys with a clear nexus to high contracting parties, and it also ensures that passengers will have had some notice and an opportunity to choose whether they are willing to subject themselves to the dictates of the convention. Thus, the convention does create a rational system for bringing some uniformity to the law regarding international air travel in a world in which every nation has not agreed to abide by its terms. Considering this analysis, the court cannot say that distinctions created by the convention among passengers on the same plane are irrational. The court noted that the impact of the convention upon international travel is de minimis. While the liability and jurisdictional limitations in the convention may have a slight chilling effect upon some people considering a trip abroad, the convention did not prevent anyone from taking such a journey. The court also noted that the convention did not prevent someone who was concerned about the liability limitation in the Warsaw Convention from obtaining additional insurance before embarking on a journey abroad. Whatever limitation there was, however, was justifiable. The convention was designed to establish uniformity in the law regarding international aviation. It recognizes that aviation links many countries with different languages, customs, and legal systems, and this goal is achieved somewhat through standard documentation, procedures for claims, and jurisdictional requirements. Because the Warsaw Convention helps to achieve the goal of uniformity in the law regarding international air travel, the court found the treaty passed the rational basis test. Lastly, let's discuss whether the result reached in this case afforded the plaintiffs due process of the law. To determine what due process is due, the court went through a three-part analysis. Number 1, the private interest that will be affected by the official action. 2, the risk of an erroneous deprivation of such interest through the procedures used and the probable value, if any, of additional or substitute procedural safeguards. And 3, the government's interest, including the function involved and the fiscal and administrative burdens that the additional or substitute procedural requirement would entail. Using this Matthews versus Eldridge test, the court found that dismissal here would not be a due process violation. The Lees asserted that if their claim against China Airlines was dismissed, they would not be able to receive an adequate hearing of their claims abroad in either Taiwan or Hong Kong. However, the Lees had failed to show that having their claims heard abroad would create a substantial risk of erroneous deprivation. They came forward with almost no evidence regarding the nature of judicial proceedings in either Hong Kong or Taiwan. The Lees' only contention regarding the unfairness of potential proceedings in either Taiwan or Hong Kong was that it would be unfair to subject them to the uncertainty regarding what law will apply to their case in those countries.